Today we are here meeting with a member of European Parliament, Claire. Thank you for your time to meet with us today. And we're talking with Claire, who is a member of European Parliament from Ireland. And we're here to ask you a few questions. Please tell us, what are the crucial issues of your activities in the European Parliament?
I want you to look at the moment. Everything is dominated by the Ukraine war. It doesn't really matter what my priorities are. On every single committee they manage to introduce the war. So I see my priority as being using my position in the Parliament to argue for peace. I think the tactics employed by the European Union of following the US NATO approach to the war, of continuing to arm the conflict, of sanctioning Russia, has actually rebounded back on Europe, and it's the citizens of Europe who are paying a huge price for these policies. The war is going on, people continue to lose their lives, people are being dislocated, and European living standards have been absolutely decimated. So these are the things we try to argue for peace and for reason in this madness. I mean, even this week there was evidence of the row emerging between the EU and the US over the energy prices, so entering the public domain for the first time, where we now know that we know anyway that the citizens of Europe are paying 4 times more for American LNG as people in America do.
Right.
And we're being forced to buy that because they say they can't do business with Russia. I mean, how is this helping ordinary citizens of Europe? It isn't.
Please tell us, how have your voters went through the pandemic, and how are they coping right now with this energy crisis?
Yeah, I mean, I think people have had a huge sort of mental strain from the whole COVID pandemic, from the lockdown, from certainly the economic dislocation. I mean, it caused people to rethink a lot of the way in which they do their work, what was important, what wasn't important. So you had many people relocating back to working from home. Some people moved to more remote areas as a result of that. But obviously, while the strategy of the EU and Ireland also was to try and shore up the situation economically, like they banned evictions and all of that. So they kept people in their homes and they gave them basically enough money. So for some people it was okay economically. The mental impact of being locked down and that. Now out of lockdown now and kind of straight into the war and energy crisis is a huge problem. Actually, the energy crisis thing now is the biggest show in town. We have many small businesses now closing, which means job losses. Some of them were there for a very long time because they can't afford to pay the bills. And this is, despite what the European Union say, directly linked to the EU's response to the war. So madness, really. So people are finding it very hard. I've no doubt that there will be people who... We have a very weak health system. So COVID did result in a lot of people dying. There were a lot of lockdowns because we couldn't afford to have a lot of people getting sick. Our health service would not withstand it. But actually the impact now in terms of living standards and energy prices is definitely going to see people dying this winter because they can't heat their homes. And already there are stories of a lot of older people, worried, not turning on their heating, sitting in jumpers and all of this. I know the weather isn't as cold in Ireland as it is in Latvia, but still we will definitely lose lives because of it.
What you're saying, it's the same relates to Latvia and Latvian people.
Mm-hmm.
Please tell us about the opportunities, challenges and difficulties of being a non-affiliated member of European Parliament.
Well, the European Parliament is a very unusual institution anyway. So when you get elected, you're kind of forced to make a choice of joining a political group, and none of them are really great, to be honest, but you kind of end up having to join one if you want to follow legislation or something. So I was a member of the Irish Parliament as an independent, along with my colleague Mick Wallace. Both of us got elected to the European Parliament. Now, we chose to join the left group only on the basis that they allow you to do whatever you like. I mean, obviously, we have to apply basic principles of social justice and non-discrimination, but within that, we have a freedom to vote as we like, which is very important to us. It's a confederal group, so we decide, every delegation has the right to vote. That's key for us because I think you need to maintain your independence in that. And for us, we've tried to use the ironically, members of national parliaments have more power than a member of the European Parliament would have, because the European Parliament can't initiate legislation, blah, blah, blah. But the European platform gives you a huge platform globally, and we've tried to use it to speak to people, to try and give confidence to people outside the chamber that actually there is an alternative, that the European Union doesn't have to be organised the way it is now as a neoliberal club, and that people should feel there are a lot of people like that. So there's a huge disconnect between the citizens of Europe and the institutions here, which are captured by big business, big pharma, the arms industry, while the people are left behind. And that's the same in every state. So we've tried to use the fact that we're non-aligned gives us a freedom to basically say as we see fit and be accountable to the people who put us in here. But once being elected, we see ourselves very much as not just being MEPs for Ireland or the little part of Ireland that elected us, but we're MEPs for Europe. And that's your job legally, and that's the way we see it. So we use the stage to try and highlight as much as possible the interests that affect ordinary citizens. And I think we've been quite surprised at how far-reaching our reach has got. Like, I mean, we were on a delegation visit to Pakistan in the last month, and it's not a country I would have done a huge amount of work in, but we were in the airport in Islamabad, and a man came up to us saying, you're the Irish politicians, we follow you. The same on the plane on the way back. So we were kind of amazed at how actually the world is crying out for an alternative. And I mean the world, like, because we would get people contacting us from Africa, from Asia, all across Europe, Ireland, everywhere. It's the same process as Latvia, I'm sure it's the same.
Absolutely.
The people in power are not representing the people. They are helped and assisted to be kept in there by the mainstream media, who are just spreading lies all of the time. And people are really sick of it. People are stressed by it, like they're kind of shocked by it, like, because the lies and the stories they're being told completely doesn't match their lives and their reality. And that's something that's very disconcerting. So a lot of people are actually deciding to opt out. They're not listening to the media. They don't get involved. Some of them are afraid to raise their voices on issues like the war, because they'll be targeted, they'll be called Kremlin puppets and all this kind of thing. So a lot of people go, well, don't need that hassle, so I'll say nothing. And we find even MEPs have said that to us at the start. In the first vote on the war, when 13 people voted against the resolution, there were other MEPs who came up and said, we understand where you're coming from, we agree, but we were afraid, we don't need that hassle. And those numbers have actually changed a bit now on the vote on the state sponsor of terrorism, which is just the stupidest thing ever, because it doesn't even exist in EU law. It's just name calling Russia and how that's going to help end the war. Even the US says, we're not going to do that because that would be stupid. It would make peace more difficult. But the EU, the European Parliament would do it no problem and shout at anybody who wouldn't do it. But 17% of MEPs didn't support that resolution. So that is a change taking place, definitely. And I think, as you know, in return, they all got a little sticker on their door from their colleagues. Door. Did you ever? Great democracy and values in your workplace by workplace colleagues, you know. There can only be one view. They give out about authoritarianism.
How do you interact with our member of European Parliament, Tatiana Zdanok?
Absolutely amazing. We only really, probably because of COVID and all of that, there was more limited interaction for MEPs when COVID was on and there was less travel. And really, since the COVID restrictions have been lifted, we've really got to know Tatiana involved in them. We're just incredibly impressed. For us, she's a nugget, as we would call it. I don't know if you know that word, but she embodies a lot of Europe's history. And for us, she's incredibly important. She's amazing, because she can give you that sort of Eastern European history, which the establishment is trying now to rewrite, which is really frightening. She embodies a lot of that in terms of her life's experience. It's an incredible insight. She is a minefield of information and a total person of integrity who has worked with us on so many progressive issues as well. But I think her knowledge of the Baltics, of relations between Russia and Europe and the former Soviet Union, which impacts on all of us in Europe. It's all our shared history, and she embodies a lot of that, and it is great, and she's a great way of working with different groups. So it's been an absolute honour for us, and an education. She's a good educator, for us to spend the time with her. She's been fantastic.
Oh, thank you for such nice words. She's our leader.
Unbelievable, she's fantastic. She is so impressive. We are just constantly bowled over, and we've introduced her to so many people from Ireland and that who just find her incredible.
In your opinion, what is the best future for the European Union? How should it be?
I don't know if it has a future. Certainly the way it's going now, it would seriously need to change tack. So I would be very pro-European in that I'm very much in favour of the maximum solidarity across Europe and indeed globally. I'm an internationalist. I want to work with people everywhere. I don't care where they come from. But the European Union, despite saying that it is a project for peace and it's a project for human rights, that's not actually true. It was primarily an economic project to advance the interests of the wealthy people in society. So it imposes a neoliberal agenda, and it speaks for big industry. And unless it changes that tack, because so many people are being left behind, we have a much more unequal Europe than we ever had before. And a lot of the countries in Eastern Europe, when they were joined in a big bloc, a lot of that to do was about bolstering NATO membership and giving the Western Europe a pool of cheap labour to exploit. So many of the Eastern European countries have lost their own young people to the West, which is really tragic. I travel a lot to Bulgaria. Bulgaria is the poorest country in the European Union. They've lost millions of their citizens because economically they're being left behind. So unless that's addressed, I think the pressures that we see now are really going to come to bear. Obviously, in the response to this war, the EU has bent the knee to the US. It doesn't have an independent stance. That's really sad. And people we meet around Africa and other parts of the world say that's really sad. Even though Europe before had a colonial history, and what they're doing now, some of it is like modern colonialism, they're still an alternative to the US and that as well, and could play a bit of a different role. So I think they need to deal with that. I think they need to challenge the fiscal restraint at the heart of the economics of Europe as well. But who knows, maybe there will be radical governments elected in some countries which will challenge that, because really it's the council that has the power. And I do think even though they're bolstering the power of the parliament somewhat, and we're the only directly elected organisation of the three, it's the council that has the power. And I think we need to see sort of radical change in some of the member states. But maybe we will, because unfortunately I think people who had the luxury of sitting back and not protesting or not trying to change their societies, that luxury won't be there now. People are going to have to try and struggle to change things for themselves. So who knows where that will make Europe end up. But if it's on the road it's going now, it's definitely not going to survive.
It's Christmas time coming, the brightest time of the year. What could you wish our voters being here in the European Parliament?
Oh, look, for me, I want to see more than anything an end to the war. It's dominating absolutely everything. It has facilitated the unleashing of billions of euros of taxpayers' money into Ukraine, into the arms industry. It's not benefiting the ordinary people of Ukraine. That country is getting into a worse state as each day goes by. I want the war ended and a negotiated peace agreement, and then we can deal with all of the other issues after that. Will that happen? It'll have to at some stage. I don't think it'll happen before Christmas. It'll happen when the US want it to happen, and unfortunately they haven't decided yet that that's what they want to do. They're quite happy to use the young people of Ukraine as cannon fodder in their wars against Russia, and it'll be ordinary Russians and ordinary Ukrainians who'll die, and ordinary people in Europe who'll starve and go hungry this winter. But war was always that, so an end to war, number one priority always.